Odette Marlowe's bathing cloths were burning in the Ivory-scale washing court when the Dragon King's own bonded dragon began showing black ash beneath his throat scales. The visiting court had gathered under arches polished so clean they reflected the morning like shallow water. Envoys stood behind silk veils to avoid the steam. Airy officials lined the marble channels, their faces arranged into pious disgust. Odette stood barefoot on the wet stone. That was part of the humiliation. A washer was not supposed to stand beside dragon bowls as if she belonged in judgment. She was supposed to kneel, scrub, rinse, and disappear before courtiers praised how clean the beasts looked beneath battle banners. The work was intimate enough to save a dragon, and low enough to be despised by everyone who benefited from it. At the center of the court, a fire brazier had been set inside a ring of white salt. Her Ashcleanse cloths lay in it, gray, cream, brown, and smoke, blue, each one hand-woven to lift soot, parasite ash, old chemical residue, rot, grit, and open wound seep from beneath scale seams. They had washed royal dragons through 3 border campaigns. They had drawn fever ash from wing roots, old cleanser from tail joints, and poison dust from folds where no court painter ever looked. Now they were called filth. Purifier Dalmor Cress held one cloth and let the envoys see the stain inside it. Contamination, he said, hidden in a widow's private tools and applied to royal bodies without proper cleansing rite. Odette lifted her chin. That stain came from the dragon. Dalmor's gaze did not shift. He was a narrow man in white purifier robes, with hands too smooth for someone who claimed to understand skin. Exactly. She carries battlefield corruption from beast to beast and calls it care. The cloths did not name guilt, Odette said. They did not judge rights. They held categories: soot, parasite ash, cleanser burn, rot grit, open, wound seep. Dragon King Severin stood beneath the arch of carved ivory scales, black crown bright against his dark hair, face as unreadable as a sealed tomb. His bonded dragon, Errand, rested behind him, washed for display until every visible plate shone. Odette remembered another night, after the Western campaign, when Severin had brought Errand to her alone. No court, no Dalmor, no silver rite. The dragon had refused purifier basins and lowered his wounded head while she worked in silence. Severin had watched then without speaking, and she had mistaken his silence for understanding. Now he looked at the cloths as if understanding had become inconvenient. My dragons must stand before allied courts without suspicion, he said. They cannot stand healthy if you only clean what visitors can see. Dalmor's mouth tightened. Majesty, the widow mistakes vulgar handling for medicine. My official cleanser purifies surface, scent, and ceremonial taint according to court standard. Her cloths keep what they remove. Every stain is evidence of contamination. No, Odette said. Every stain is a record of what was taken off before it burned deeper. The courtiers murmured at the word burned. Silas Marlowe had died with red welts along his palms and a cough that smelled of bitter lime. He had helped Dalmor's first purification crew before the formula received its court name. The record called his death poor constitution. After campaign labor, his file was not evidence yet. It was only the old shape of the question she had never been allowed to ask, so she had learned dragons instead. Their skin did not lie politely for officials. Severin's eyes moved once toward Errand. The dragon's tail had curled away from Dalmor's attendants all morning. Odette saw it. The groom saw it. Even Severin saw it, because his jaw set. But he did not ask why. Burn them, he said. The order did not make the court cleaner. It only destroyed the records that had touched what the basins missed. No apology, no inquiry, No permission for her to explain the scale maps stitched into the cloth hems or the color codes that told her which stain came from soot, parasite ash, old cleanser, or open wound. The first cloth blackened. Odette did not reach for it. If she tried to save the tools, they would call her frantic. If she wept, they would call her guilty. She stood still while years of slow care curled into smoke before nobles who had never cleaned beneath a dragon's jaw. A young courtier laughed softly. The washing widow looks cleaner without her rags. Erin's head lifted. The laughter stopped. Ash rose from the brazier. It should have scattered upward into the venting arches. Instead, the steam drew it low across Erin's throat, where dark residue already trapped beneath the sealed scale seam caught and darkened. Dalmor stepped forward. Smoke residue. Nothing more. Smoke would sit on the surface. This line had risen from under scale. Odette's voice was quiet. Then rinse it. The purifier attendant poured ceremonial water over Erin's throat. The black line did not wash away. It thickened in the hidden seam beneath 3 perfect white scales. Erin shuddered once. The pearl plates parted just enough for the court to see raw skin beneath them, red as banked coals and edged with dark powder. No one spoke. Odette did not say Dalmor had harmed him. She did not say Severin knew. She did not say her cloths had accused anyone. She said only what the mark could carry. That is untreated residue under sealed scale. It was not visible because the surface was made clean. Dalmor's face remained smooth. Smoothness was his skill. A purifier did not need to panic when the court still called his standard official. A single old seam revealed by smoke proves nothing about my rights. No, Odette said. It proves the cloth burned cleaner than the dragon did. Severin looked at Erin, then at the brazier, then at the woman whose tools he had ordered destroyed. He did not restore her. He did not stop the burning. By then, one smoke-blue hemstrip had fallen outside the brazier ring, its stitch code still intact. Pain dragged Erin's head low, not into her hands, but into the open space where the hidden seam could no longer be painted clean. Then a second dark line surfaced under the inner wing joint, small enough for Dalmor to dispute, and clear enough that Severin could no longer call the first mark smoke. The mark did not clear Odette. It did not condemn Dalmor. It only demanded that Erin's throat seam wash ledger be opened. The Wolf King crushed Theodosia Kren's guest right moonstones and called her Mercy Rebellion. Years ago, he survived beneath her roof as a wounded prince. Now, as king, he lets her petitions be sealed, her authority questioned, and exiled families left outside in the snow. In this werewolf romance story, a widow heroine faces a dangerous king, a ruthless minister, and an ancient law that refuses to die. The stones do not pardon anyone. They only remember bread, witness, arrival, before midnight, and the dawn hearing every exile was owed. But when the royal doors open by themselves and the first family appears at the threshold, the truth begins to crack open. C7 records, E9 compression, estate ledgers, and a hidden contingency writ reveal a royal betrayal that turned shelter into treason. Now the Wolf King must face the law he broke. Erin's throat seam wash ledger did not say Dalmor Cress had poisoned him. It said the official wash had cleaned the scale the court could see and skipped the seam where Ash could live. The ledger was brought to the ivory scale washing court with its ivory cover still damp from basin steam. Odette Marlowe stood beside the salt ring brazier while the last of her burned cloths settled into gray curls. One smoke-blue hemstrip lay outside the fire, its stitch code intact, too small to save her work and too important to ignore. Dragon King Severin Call ordered Erin's wash ledger opened. He did not apologize. He did not restore Odette's washing authority. He did not stop the burning. The guards remained between her and the wash tables, and the court still watched her as the widow, whose private cloths had been called filth before allied envoys. Dalmor Cress folded his hands inside his white sleeves. A wash ledger records completed rite, Majesty. It does not diagnose campaign irritation. No, Odette said. It records which parts of the dragon were touched and which were made clean only from a distance. The ledger listed errands preparation for the visiting court. Surface polish, scent neutralization, ceremonial shine, visible scale rinse, wing edge gloss, throat display wipe. Display wipe. Not seam lift, not underscale cleaning, not residue draw. A wipe could satisfy a court. It could not reach what a dragon hid under pain. Severin's eyes moved to the black line under Erin's throat, where 3 pearl scales had parted enough to show raw skin beneath. Was the throat seam opened? He asked. The basin clerk looked toward Dalmor before answering. Not under court display standard, Majesty. Why? Dalmor answered smoothly. Opening seams before diplomatic presentation risks redness, swelling, and vulgar appearance. Display standard preserves dignity. Odette looked at Erin, who held his head low but not toward her hands. Pain had drawn him down. Loyalty had not been asked to become evidence. Dignity for whom? She said. Dalmor's face remained calm. Royal dragons must appear pure before allied courts. Full seam washing is performed when necessary, not before every presentation. Erind returned from campaign 3 nights ago, Odette said. His throat seam carried soot, old salve, and scale heat after the Western campaign. He should have had a full seam wash before display. Severin looked at her sharply. How do you know that? Because the Western campaign scale map in my notes marked that seam before the court display wash ever touched him. The scale seam map was requested. Dalmor's lips thinned. Mistress Marlowe's private maps are not part of purifier record. That is the question, Severin said. Odette's scale map had not been attached to the official wash packet. A folded copy was found in the rejected washer notes, marked non-ceremonial handling reference. Excluded did not mean false. It meant the map had been made useless before anyone had to disprove it. Her stitching on the map showed Erin's throat seam in smoke blue inner wing joint in brown-black, lower tail fold in gray. Each color matched a cloth category. The smoke blue hemstrip was placed beside the map. Odette did not touch it. The stitch code marks cleanser burn mixed with old soot, she said. Not guilt, not poison, a residue category. Dalmor lifted one brow. Your own code admits cleanser burn because your cloth carried contamination. No, it says the cloth lifted a residue that burned skin when sealed beneath scale. It does not yet say whose cleanser left it. That restraint cost her. She wanted to say, Silas Marlowe had coughed bitter lime because purifier crews had used formulas no one respected enough to record properly. But wanting was not proof. Silas's file was not evidence yet, only the old shape of the question. The basin rinse record came next. It measured surface scent, water clarity, visible scale shine, and ceremonial purity mark. No column for seam residue, no note for underscale heat. No place to record a dragon flinching away from a basin because the water touched a hidden burn. The rinse passed. Dalmor said. Yes, Odette answered. Because it measured the part of Erind already clean. The official cleanser formula batch was placed on the table. Ivory purifier batch 12. Ingredients listed lime salts, white ash distillate, flower resin, scale brightening mineral, and airy scent binder. Approved for visible ceremonial cleansing, according to court standard. Surface again. The word had begun to sound less like cleanliness and more like concealment. Severin read the batch line. Is this formula meant for open seams? The formula clerk answered. For visible ceremonial cleansing, Majesty. Direct seam application, requires dilution. Was it diluted? The basin clerk turned a page. No dilution recorded. No direct seam application recorded. Dalmore stepped in. Because no seam application occurred. Smoke from the brazier may have irritated an old wound and drawn residue outward. Odette nodded once. That is possible. She kept her voice steady, which is why the ledger must show whether the residue was already there before the smoke. The surface record cannot answer that. Severin turned to the basin clerk. Was there a pre-burn throat check? No, Majesty. Display wash was certified complete. Without a pre-burn check, Dalmore could blame the smoke, and Odette could not prove what the smoke had only revealed. By whom? The page showed Dalmore's purifier seal and the ivory scale court standard mark. It did not prove malice. It proved that the court standard had allowed a dragon to appear flawless, while hidden seams remained unread. The second dark line under Erin's inner wing joint was examined only by sight, not touch. Odette was not permitted closer. She described only what distance allowed. Brown, black edge, consistent with old cleanser mixed with rot grit, not yet showing the wet shine of open wound seep. Consistent, Severin said. Yes, Odette answered. Not certain, not from here. He looked at the guards. He did not remove them. Bring the full campaign wash sequence, Severin ordered, and the excluded scale. Map packet. No authority returned. No accusation withdrawn. No cloth restored from ash, but the court display standard had stopped being clean enough to stand alone. Then the basin clerk found one additional note beneath Erin's wash packet. Surface-only preparation ordered for visiting envoys under display standard. Avoid seam opening unless visible corruption appears. Odette looked at the black line beneath the throat scales. Visible corruption had been required before anyone was allowed to look where corruption could hide. The note did not prove harm. It proved the court had ordered beauty first and permitted health only after damage became visible. The campaign wash sequence did not say Dalmore Cress had harmed Erin. It said Odette's scale map had been removed before the court decided what clean was supposed to mean. The full packet was opened in 3 parts: campaign return sequence, envoy display preparation, and excluded washer notes tied with a grey ribbon. Odette Marlowe stood where the guards left her, near the salt-ring brazier, with the smoke-blue hemstrip on the wet marble between ash and the king's ledgers. Dragon King Severin Call ordered the campaign sequence read aloud first. He did not apologize. He did not restore Odette's washing authority. He did not withdraw the accusation. The fire had burned down, but its work remained done. Most of her Ashcleanse Cloths were ash, and the court had watched them die as filth. Dalmore Cress kept his hands folded. A campaign wash sequence records ideal care after return. An envoy display packet records presentation needs. They are different instruments. They became different enough to lose the wound, Odette said. The campaign return sequence listed Erin's arrival from the western pass. Soot along throat seam, heat tightness under inner wing, salve residue from saddle harness, scale irritation at the lower neck after smoke exposure. Odette's recommendation followed in a smaller hand. Full seam lift before any presentation. Smoke. Blue cloth for throat. Brown. Black cloth for wing joint. Dilute rinse only after residue draw. Severin looked from the recommendation to Erin's lowered head. Was this recommendation disputed? The wash clerk answered carefully. Not in the campaign sequence, Majesty. It was marked pending because the envoy court required presentation the next morning. Pending by whom? The clerk turned a page. Transferred into envoy display review. Not refused. Not false. Transferred until it no longer governed the hands that touched the dragon. A transfer could look harmless on paper. That was why it could move pain out of the room without anyone calling it refusal. The envoy display packet came next. It valued visible shine, scent neutrality, ceremonial purity, and allied court impression. Erin's throat seam appeared only as display wipe. The inner wing joint appeared only as wing edge gloss. Odette's scale map was referenced in a margin, then struck with a thin line, non-ceremonial handling reference, excluded from presentation packet. Excluded did not make the map wrong. It made the dragon's pain administratively inconvenient. Severin's voice cooled. Who struck it? The clerk swallowed. Envoy preparation desk, under display standard. Name, a desk seal, Majesty. Not a personal hand. Dalmor spoke before the silence thickened. Display standard is not mine alone. The allied courts expect royal dragons to appear unmarked. Opening seams before diplomatic review can create redness envoys, mistake for illness. Odette looked at the raw line beneath Erin's throat. So you hid possible illness to avoid the appearance of illness. I prevented unnecessary alarm before proof. No, she said. You prevented looking until alarm had a visible shape. The basin rinse runoff diagram. The diagram showed cleanser poured over crown ridge, throat display plates, wing edge, and tail sheen. Liquid drained downward through scale channels into floor grooves. Odette leaned forward despite the guard. There, Severin followed her gaze. What? The throat display plates sit above the seam. If batch 12 was used undiluted for surface shine, runoff could gather beneath those 3 scales without anyone writing direct seam application. The formula clerk said quickly, Runoff is not application. No, Odette said, and that is why the record may be clean while the seam is not. It was the kind of distinction that protected a ledger better than it protected skin. Ivory purifier batch 12 remained on the table. Lime salts, white ash distillate, flower resin, scale brightening mineral, airy scent binder. No line said poison. No line said harm. The batch approval had been granted for visible ceremonial cleansing, not long contact beneath sealed scale. Odette did not pretend it proved more than that. She said, The question is not whether the batch was approved. The question is whether approval for shine was used where living skin needed care. Severin turned to Dalmor. Did you sign the surface? Only order? Dalmor touched his sleeve. I signed purifier completion. Errand presented under court display standard. The surface, only preparation order, came from envoy display requirement, with purifier office compliance. The order route confirmed it. Chamber of Visiting Courts. Requested immaculate presentation. Airy purifier office certified completion. Basin clerks followed display standard. Odette's map was excluded before the final wash table received the packet. No single seal had yet confessed to harm. Together, the route had made the hidden seam irrelevant. Then the excluded washer packet was opened. Inside were Odette's scale map, 2 campaign notes from grooms saying Errand had resisted throat rinsing after the Western Pass, and a prior warning written in her hand. If throat seam is not lifted, residue may seal under pearl plates and burn when reheated by steam, Dalmor said. A washer's prediction is not a diagnosis. No, Odette said. It is a warning before a diagnosis becomes necessary. Silas Marlowe's Limecoff file was mentioned only because the formula clerk found a cross-reference to trial purifier batch 3. Exposure complaint, purifier crew laborer, red hand welts, bitter lime cough, poor constitution entered after campaign service. Odette did not reach for it. Her hands shook once and stilled. That file does not prove this batch harmed Errand, she said. Severin looked at her. What does it prove? That lime formulas have hurt workers before, without the record asking whether the formula was the cause. Errand shifted his wing. The second dark line did not spread. It did not need to. It remained small, disputed. and visible enough to keep the ledger open. Severin ordered the envoy display route, basin runoff diagram, batch 12 dilution rule, and excluded washer packets sealed together under witness. No authority returned. No accusation withdrawn. But Odette saw him look at the burned cloth ash, then at the intact smoke-blue hemstrip, and then at Erin's throat. "Bring the basin residue bowls," he said. He did not say bring Odette's authority. He asked only for the next place the wash might have left itself behind. The basin clerk's eyes moved once toward the floor grooves, because the basins had been rinsed for shine, but the grooves beneath them had not yet been scrubbed clean. The bowls would not clear her. They would only answer whether yesterday's shine had carried what the ledger refused to name. The basin residue bowls did not say Dalmor Cress had poisoned Erin. They said yesterday's shine had left traces in places the rinse record had no column to name. The bowls were brought from the ivory-scale storage room one by one. Shallow silver vessels nested in white linen and labeled by wash station. Odette Marlowe remained behind the guard line, close enough to see the rims, too far to smell what still clung to them. The smoke-blue hemstrip lay beside her burned cloth ash, its stitch code intact. Dragon King Severin Call ordered the bowls set in the order of Erin's display wash. He did not apologize. He did not restore Odette's authority. He did not withdraw the accusation that her Ashcleanse Cloths had carried corruption from beast to beast. Dalmor Cress watched the basins without changing expression. Residue in a bowl after ceremonial washing is expected. Cleansers lift dirt. That is their purpose. Yes, Odette said. The question is what kind of dirt the record chose to call clean. The basin clerk identified 4 bowls: crown ridge, throat display plates, wing edge gloss, tail sheen. The crown bowl had been fully rinsed and polished for reuse. The tail bowl was empty, its scent binder faint. The wing bowl held a thin brown film along the paw lip. The throat bowl looked clean until Severin tilted it under the white court light. A dark crescent clung beneath the inner rim. Not much, not enough to convict anyone. Enough that no one could call it imagined. "Was this throat bowl rinsed?" Severin asked. The basin clerk checked the chain slip. "Rinsed once for shine, Majesty. Not scrubbed. Disposal log held for end of court clearing. Why not scrubbed? Display schedule. The basins were to be reused after envoy inspection if needed." Dalmor nodded. "Standard economy. Rinsing removes surface soil between presentation stages. Full scrubbing is done after court close." Odette looked at the dark crescent. Surface soil again. The residue category comparison was prepared under witness. Not with all her cloths. Those were ash. Only with the smoke-blue hemstrip, Erin's throat mark noted by sight, the basin residue, and the approved formula sample of ivory purifier batch 12. Odette was not permitted to touch the samples. She named the category from the stitch code, and then stopped. Smoke, blue marks, cleanser burn, mixed with old soot. It does not identify a maker. It does not prove harm by itself. The comparison clerk warmed a shaving of the throat bowl residue in a clean spoon. The film darkened at the edge and gave off a bitter brightness that made Erin stir behind the guard line. No smoke rose like a sign. No hidden voice named a culprit. The residue simply held its shape longer than ordinary soot and left a blue-gray stain on the test cloth. "Consistent with smoke blue category," the clerk said. "Not conclusive without seam sample." Dalmor spread his hands. "A category from a washer's surviving hem cannot outrank court formula approval." "No," Odette answered. "But it can show which approval failed to ask the right question." The floor grooves were open next. They ran beneath the basins in narrow channels cut into marble, meant to carry rinse water away without staining the court's white surface. Cleanliness had been designed to disappear downward. Now servants lifted the groove plates, and the court saw what disappearance had collected. Grey scent foam, pale lime grit, brown-black flecks. A dark thread gathered beneath the throat station, heavier than the crown residue and sharper than the wing film. The disposal log recorded yesterday's wash. Batch 12, poured at full ceremonial strength. Surface rinse following. Throat display plates wiped. Runoff cleared to east groove. No seam inspection. No residue category required. Severin read the line twice. No residue category required, Dalmore said, because court display standard classifies successful wash by visible purity, not by every mineral or ash lifted in runoff. Odette's voice stayed even. Then the standard can pass a wash while the runoff carries what hurt the seam. Possible, the comparison clerk said. Not proven as injury. Possible is all I said. That restraint mattered more than anger. Anger would have let them call her grief reckless. Precision forced them to stay in the room. The runoff diagram was placed beside the disposal log. The throat station drained through the same east groove where the darkest thread had gathered. If undiluted batch 12 crossed the throat display plates, mixed with old soot, and slipped beneath a sealed seam, the record could still say no direct seam application. Runoff was not application. It was the kind of distinction that protected a ledger better than it protected skin. Severin turned to the clerk. Who ordered the basins cleaned for shine only? The disposal log showed Ivory Scale Steward Office. Envoy reset order. After first display stage. Purifier completion had Dalmore's seal. Residue disposal carried the steward's mark. Not his, Dalmore said. I certified that the visible right was complete. I did not sign the disposal delay. And the surface? Only preparation? Severin asked. Envoy display requirement with purifier compliance, as already read. Still procedural. Still narrow. Then Severin ordered Odette's excluded warning, placed over the disposal log. If throat seam is not lifted, residue may seal under pearl plates and burn when reheated by steam. The court display standard required visible corruption before seam opening. Odette's warning said the seam might become visibly corrupted because it was not opened. That did not clear her. It did not condemn Dalmore. It proved that the warning, if attached, should have triggered at least a seam inspection before presentation. Dalmore's mouth tightened. A washer's warning cannot halt court display every time she fears irritation. No, Odette said. But it should have stopped you from calling the unseen clean. For the first time, Severin looked not at Dalmore, not at the envoys, but at the row of dragons waiting beyond the second arch for ceremonial preparation. Old Tharos, with scarred shoulder plates. Small-winged Mavek, still weak from border fever. 2 younger court dragons, restless beneath scent veils. The steward's next schedule was brought forward. 3 more dragons were marked for surface-only envoy display before sunset. No one had opened their seam maps. Bring their wash packets, Severin ordered. He did not say, bring Odette's authority. He did not say she was innocent. He asked only for the records, before the basins touched another living seam. And beyond the second arch, old Tharos refused the purifier bowl so hard the silver water spilled across the white floor. The old dragon's refusal did not prove the purifier bowl was harmful. It proved the court had learned to call resistance disobedience before it asked what pain was resisting. Tharos struck the marble once with the heel of his foreclaw, not hard enough to crack the ivory scale floor, but hard enough to send silver water trembling across the white channels. He was older than 3 border treaties, scarred along the shoulder where a spear hook had once dragged scale from bone. Envoys stepped back. Purifier attendants tightened their grip on poles and basin chains. Odette Marlowe did not move. The guards still stood between her and the dragons. Dragon King Severin Call looked from the spilled water to Tharos's lifted shoulder plates. Do not force him. Dalmor Cress inclined his head. Majesty, old campaign beasts often resist presentation after seeing another dragon handled. It is imitation, not evidence. No, Odette said. It is not evidence. But it is a reason not to put undiluted surface cleanser over a scar seam before reading his packet. Dalmor's eyes cooled. Mistress Marlowe continues to offer conclusions from a distance. Then bring the packet closer to the truth. Severin ordered Tharos's wash packet opened. He did not apologize. He did not restore Odette's washing authority. He did not withdraw the charge that her Ashcleanse Cloths had been contamination. The burned ash remained inside the salt ring, and the intact smoke-blue hem strip lay under witness like a surviving corner of a language the court had tried to destroy. The packet showed Tharos scheduled for surface-only envoy display. Shoulder gloss, horn ridge polish, scent veil, visible scar brightening. Odette's old scale note appeared in the excluded section. Scar shoulder seam must be lifted after heat marches. Residue gathers beneath ridge. Brown, black cloth recommended before any brightening mineral. Was the scar seam lifted? Severin asked. The wash clerk answered, Not yet, Majesty. His display wash had not begun. Was it required? Not under display standard unless visible seep or active swelling appeared. Tharos held his shoulder high. The old scar ridged like a closed gate. Odette's voice stayed measured. A dragon can guard a seam before it swells, Dalmor said. And a washer can read fear into every motion if she wishes to avoid court scrutiny. That is why the packet matters more than my wish. The next packet belonged to Mavek, small-winged and pale after border fever. Her preparation order listed scent neutralization, wing membrane shine, tail curl polish. Odette's excluded note marked fever residue near the wing root and warned against scent binder before full rinse. The basin rinse record held no column for fever residue. The display packet called her suitable for visual presentation, if no visible discharge. Mavek stood behind a scent veil, shaking so faintly only handlers seemed to notice. Severin noticed because Odette did not look away from her. Has Mavek been washed? He asked. Surface rinse only, Majesty, the clerk said. No full display polish yet, Dalmor added. She passed visible inspection this morning. Odette said nothing until Severin looked at her. Then she said, Visible inspection is not a lie. It is only too small. The words did not accuse. They narrowed the room until every official had to stand inside what his own record could hold. The third dragon's packet was different. Young Arvin had no campaign scar, no fever residue, no throat warning. Odette's map showed ordinary soot along outer plates and no excluded seam note. His display standard might have been sufficient. The court did not like that answer. They wanted her either frantic or victorious. She gave them neither. Not every dragon needs the same wash, she said. That is the point. Dalmor's mouth tightened. Then you admit court standard can be proper. For a dragon whose body matches the standard. Severin's gaze moved over the three packets. Tharos with scar seam, Mavek with fever residue, Arvin with ordinary soot. The surface-only schedule had treated them alike because envoys needed them to appear alike. The order route was opened again. Chamber of Visiting Courts requested 6 dragons prepared before sunset for Allied inspection. Airy Purifier Office certified availability under display standard. Ivory Scale Steward Office arranged basin reset for shine. Washer notes were separated into non-ceremonial handling references unless visible corruption required review. Who decided the washer notes remained outside unless visible corruption appeared? Severin asked. The clerk read the root seal. Display Coordination Desk, Majesty. Adopted from Purifier Standard Guidance. Dalmor answered carefully. Guidance, not personal instruction. It prevents private handling notes from delaying ceremonies without visible cause. Odette looked at Erin's throat, then at Tharos's guarded shoulder, then at Mavek's trembling wing. Visible cause arrives late. No one answered that. The rinse disposal log for the next set of basins showed batch 12 planned at full ceremonial strength for surface shine, with dilution required only for direct seam work. Since no seam work had been approved, no dilution had been prepared. Runoff again. A clean ledger waiting for unclean skin. Severin ordered the scheduled display washes held pending packet review. Dalmore's voice sharpened for the first time. Majesty, Allied envoys will take delay as weakness. Then, they may witness why delay was necessary. Still, no apology. Still no restoration. But the court display schedule had stopped moving faster than the dragon's bodies. Odette asked for nothing. Asking too soon would let them make her need the subject instead of the dragon's care. She stood barefoot in cooling wash water and watched attendants draw the basins back from Tharos and Mavek. Then the handler beside Tharos whispered, "There is an older shoulder bowl." The court turned. The handler lowered his eyes. From last winter's victory procession. It was kept because the brightening mineral crystallized along the rim. Mistress Marlowe objected then too. Dalmore said, "Old ceremonial residue has no bearing on today's court." "Bring it," Severin said. The old bowl arrived, wrapped in storage linen, its rim crusted pale gold. Under the gold brightening crust, a brown-black line curved in the same place. Odette's excluded scar-seam note marked Tharos's shoulder. Not proof of poison, not proof of intent, only an old residue category, waiting one winter to show the court that the same warning had been ignored before. The winter procession bowl did not say Dalmore Cress had burned Tharos. It said an old warning had been stored as a flaw in metal instead of a question about skin. The bowl sat on the central marble table with its pale gold crust catching the court light. Beneath that brightening mineral, a brown-black curve marked the inner rim, narrow as a closed eyelid and nearly hidden where servants would have held the vessel away from guests. Odette Marlowe looked at it from behind the guard line, barefoot in cooling water, the smoke-blue hemstrip still under witness beside the burned ash of her cloths. Dragon King Severin Call ordered the winter storage ledger opened. He did not apologize. He did not restore her washing authority. He did not withdraw the accusation against the Ashcleanse Cloths. The old bowl had been brought because a handler remembered, not because the court had suddenly learned to trust a washer's memory. Dalmore Cress studied the crust. Brightening mineral can crystallize in storage. That is maintenance failure, not injury. No, Odette said. It is not injury by itself. The court waited for more. She refused to give it more than the bowl could carry. It is a residue category, in the same place my excluded note marked Tharos's scar seam. That means the old record should be opened. Severin's gaze shifted to the storage clerk. Read it. The winter victory procession record listed. Tharos prepared under ceremonial display standard. Shoulder scar brightened, visible plates polished, scent neutralized, no seam lift required, no active swelling observed. Odette's objection appeared in the margin, entered after completion. Brown-black cloth, advised before mineral gloss. Scar ridge, holds old rot grit after cold marches. Do not seal before cleaning. After completion, not before the basin touched him. Not before the brightening crust settled over the rim. Dalmore said, "A late objection cannot govern a completed right." Odette looked at Tharos, whose scarred shoulder remained lifted beneath the arch. That was exactly the problem last winter, too. The storage note followed. Bowl retained for mineral crystallization review. Washer complaint attached. No dragon injury confirmed. Returned to ceremonial inventory after polishing. No seam inspection recorded. No category comparison requested. The phrase, "no injury confirmed," sounded responsible until placed beside the phrase, "no seam inspection recorded." "You cannot confirm what you never opened," Odette said. The comparison clerk, tested a shaving of the old rim. The brown-black line softened under heat and left a dull stain on the test linen, darker than ordinary soot, less sharp than Erin's smoke-blue throat residue. Odette named it carefully. Consistent with old cleanser, mixed with rot grit, not fresh burn, not open wound seep. Consistent again, Dalmor said. Yes, she answered. Because a category is not a verdict. Severin's face did not soften. Did Tharos show injury after that procession? The handler bowed. He resisted shoulder harness for 11 days. Records called him temperamental from age. The harness record was brought. Refusal, shoulder guarding, reduced flight turns. No purifier review requested because no visible discharge. The court had named behavior before it named pain. Dalmor's voice remained steady. Aging dragons often guard old wounds, and that is why old wounds should be opened gently before they are glossed for strangers, Odette said. The batch ledger was placed beside the winter bowl record. Last winter's formula had not been batch 12. It was Ivory Purifier batch 9, same court approval family, with lime salts lower by measure, and brightening mineral higher for winter ceremonies. Not identical. Not proof that one batch harmed another dragon, but the dilution rule was the same. Visible surface use approved. Direct seam application required dilution. Runoff into unopened seams not separately classified. The same missing place in the record. Severin touched the page with one finger. How long has runoff into unopened seams been unclassified? The formula clerk turned pages with nervous care. Since the standard was adopted, Majesty, it was considered incidental contact. Odette said, incidental to the ledger, not incidental to skin. A low sound moved through the dragons beyond the second arch. Not magic, not testimony. Only old bodies reacting to voices and basins and the smell of formulas that had touched them before. Mavic trembled under her scent veil. Severin saw it. Remove the veil. Dalmor objected at once. Majesty, she is scheduled for envoy inspection. Removing scent veil before presentation may compromise the rite. She is shaking. Fever recovery leaves weakness. Odette did not step forward. Her packet warned against scent binder before full rinse. The clerk found the line. Excluded washer note. Fever residue near wing root. Scent binder may seal heat under membrane. Full rinse recommended before any veil. The veil was lifted under a handler's hand. No black ash poured. No dramatic wound opened. Only a damp heat mark showed beneath the wing root, faint and yellow-gray, uncertain enough for Dalmor to dispute and real enough that the handler swallowed. Odette did not call it poison. Consistent with trapped fever residue under scent binder, she said. Needs rinse and review, not display. Severin ordered Mavic removed from the envoy presentation list. Still no apology. Still no restoration. But the oldest dragon and the weakest dragon had stopped being decoration before they were patients. Dalmor's restraint thinned. If every excluded washer note is allowed to delay court function, the Ivory Scale standard will become impossible. No, Odette said. It will become honest about which dragons it was made for. The old bowl storage ledger had one final attachment. Disposal review from the same winter procession. It listed Silas Marlowe as a contract rinser on an early purifier crew assigned to trial brightening residue before batch 9 entered full court use. Odette's breath changed. She did not reach for the page. Dalmor's expression did not confess anything. Many laborers rinsed vessels that winter. Yes, Odette said, forcing her voice back into shape. And the page proves only that Silas touched early residue. It does not prove what killed him. Then the storage clerk turned the attachment over. On the back was a note in Silas Marlowe's hand, filed with maintenance instead of health. Lime sting in palms after brightening rinse. Cough worsens near hot basins. Request gloves before next court wash. No one moved. The note did not solve his death. It only proved that before Silas was called weak, he had asked the court not to make him touch the shine bare-handed again. The glove request did not say Silas Marlowe had died from purifier cleanser. It said the court had known. His hands burned before his lungs were called weak. The note lay on the back of the winter disposal attachment, ink faded by damp storage and old steam. Lime sting in palms after brightening rinse. Cough worsens near hot basins. Request gloves before next court wash. Odette Marlowe read it from behind the guard line, because no one had returned her right to touch records tied to her own dead husband. Dragon King Severin Cole ordered the maintenance file opened. He did not apologize. He did not restore her washing authority. He did not clear the Ashcleanse Cloths. He did not say Silas's name with tenderness. He said it as a king, reopening a file that should never have been shut so easily. Dalmore Crest stood very still beside the purifier table. Maintenance complaints are not medical findings, Majesty. Laborers ask for gloves when basins are hot, when minerals dry the skin, when work becomes uncomfortable. Odette looked at the red memory of Silas's hands inside her mind and kept her voice level. Uncomfortable does not leave a cough that smells of lime. A few envoys shifted behind their veils. The maintenance ledger listed Silas as contract rinser, winter trial crew, assigned to vessel rinse after early brightening residue. Gloves requested twice. First request marked supply delayed. Second marked denied pending proof of chemical hazard. No medical referral attached. No formula review attached. Exposure complaint transferred to labor endurance record. Labor, endurance. Not skin, not breath, not formula. Severin's eyes narrowed. Who transferred it? The clerk read the route. Ivory scale maintenance desk, with purifier notation, standard residue within expected discomfort. Dalmore inclined his head. Expected discomfort was not a dismissal. It meant the formula had not been classified as hazardous. That is the difficulty, Odette said. Nothing is hazardous until enough bodies fail to make comfort sound dishonest. The court did not like that sentence. It made politeness too small for what it had covered. The purifier crew log was opened next. Trial brightening residue, winter procession preparation, hot basin rinse, lime salt haze observed when vessels warmed. Workers rotated every third basin when coughing increased. Silas's name appeared on 3 consecutive hot basin shifts because 2 other rinsers had been reassigned to banner duty. Not murder, not proof of death, only exposure arranged as labor because no standard had named it otherwise. Dalmore said, Trial residue was not batch 12. No, Odette said. And Tharos's bowl was not Erin's throat. Records are not the same merely because grief wants them to be. Severin looked at her then, as if restraint wounded him more than accusation would have. She gave him nothing softer. He had burned the cloths before asking what categories grief had taught her to keep. The formula clerk placed 3 pages side by side. Trial brightening residue, batch 9, batch 12. Each carried lime salts. Each carried brightening mineral. The measures differed. The approvals differed. The warnings differed. Trial residue had a note for hot basin handling. Avoid enclosed steam if workers cough. Batch 9 carried no worker handling note. Batch 12 carried court approval for visible ceremonial cleansing. The line had not vanished all at once. It had thinned as the formula became respectable. Odette did not say that aloud. She waited until Severin asked, "What does this prove?" "It proves a handling warning existed before later court batches looked cleaner on paper," she said. "It does not prove batch 12 harmed Erin. It does not prove Silas died from the first trial residue. It proves the questions were known before the answers were made official. Dalmore's mouth tightened. Mistress Marlowe's grief makes her a compromised interpreter. There it was. Not shouted. Not cruel enough for the court to reject. A clean knife placed where a widow's hand still shook. Odette felt the old humiliation rise. Not that she mourned, but that mourning made every true thing she said easier to discard. Severin turned toward her. "You will answer only in residue categories and record roots." The words struck harder than protection would have. He did not defend her grief. He confined it, but he did not remove her. Odette swallowed once. "Then ask better questions." The surviving hemstrip was brought beside the formula pages. Smoke blue for cleanser burn mixed with old soot. Brown-black for old cleanser with rot grit. Pale yellow-gray for fever residue and a scent binder. Her hem codes were not royal standard. They were washer's standard, built from hands, cloth, heat, and dragon skin. Over years the court had never counted. The comparison clerk requested the original hem code index. Dalmore objected. "Her cloths have been condemned as contaminated. Their private index cannot be accepted as formal measure." "No," Severin said. "It can be read as handling record under dispute." "Unter dispute." Not accepted. Not restored. Still, the index existed because Odette had kept copies in a tin case beneath the washbench, away from wet basins. A guard brought it without giving her the key to anything else. Its pages showed categories, not accusations. Soot, parasite ash, cleanser burn, rot grit, open wound, seep, fever residue, salve, crust, scale, heat, each tied to cloth color and stitch pattern, each cross-reference to dragons, dates, seams, and aftercare. The court grew quieter as the index was read, not because it believed her, because it understood, slowly and against its will, that the burned cloths had been records. Severin ordered the hem code index sealed with the basin residue bowls, floor groove traces, cleanser formula pages, and Silas's maintenance note. No authority returned. No accusation withdrawn. Then the washer's tin yielded one last page, folded into the back cover and stained along the edge. Odette knew it before the clerk read the heading. Ivory scale aftercare list. Dragons too old, too weak, or too recently wounded for envoy display, without full seam wash. At the top were 3 names: Thorush, Mavek, Ierunt. Beneath them, in her own hand, Odette had written, "If display must proceed, I refuse to prepare them for beauty before health." The aftercare list did not clear Odette Marlowe. It proved she had refused beauty work before the court learned to call refusal contamination. The page lay open in the washer's tin, stained along one edge where steam had warped the paper. Tharos, Mavek, Erind. 3 names written in Odette's hand, each followed by a seam warning, a residue category, and a line no envoy would have wanted to hear before supper. Not fit for display without full seam wash. Dragon King Severin Cole read the last sentence twice. "If display must proceed, I refuse to prepare them for beauty before health." The words were not romantic. They were not magical. They were not gentle enough for the court to turn into feminine virtue. They were professional, stubborn, and costly. Dalmore Cress lifted his chin. "A refusal note explains motive, Majesty. Mistress Marlowe had reason to resent the purifier standard and the visiting court. Contaminated cloths and obstructive refusals belong to the same pattern." Odette felt the accusation settle again, cleaner than before, because it now wore evidence beside it. "She refused to polish injured dragons," one envoy murmured. "She refused a royal schedule," another corrected. Severin closed the tin lid halfway, then stopped. Was this aftercare list attached to the charge packet against her? The court clerk opened the accusation file. Unauthorized private cloths. contamination risk, obstructive handling, refusal to complete ceremonial preparation, undermining court confidence before allied envoys. No aftercare list, only the refusal extracted from it, stripped of the names, the categories, and the reason. Odette did not smile. Vindication offered too soon was another trap. A refusal without its aftercare note looks like defiance. That is why the note was written. Dalmore's reply came measured. The charge packet summarized behavior relevant to court disruption. It was not required to carry every private explanation. No, she said. Only the explanation that made the disruption care. Severin looked at the guard line between her and the dragons. He did not order it removed. Limited health review, he said. Tharos, Mavic, and Erend. Under witness, no ceremonial preparation, no restoration of accused tools, no clearance of charges. The words should have hurt less, because they allowed the dragons to be seen. They hurt more because he still knew how to build a cage and call it procedure. Odette bowed her head once. Oldest first, weakest second, bonded last. Dalmore's brows drew together. Erend is the royal dragon. Erend is strong enough to wait. Tharos made a low sound from the second arch, as if age itself had approved. The court moved to the lower washing channel, not the display platform. No perfumes were opened. No scent veils were tied. No brightening mineral was poured. Plain warmed water, softened linen, clean hooks, and narrow seam wedges were brought from general stores because her Ashcleanse Cloths were ash. Odette examined the linen and rejected half of it. A steward bristled. It is clean. For hands, she said. Not for lifted scale. She chose the least rough strips, folded them, and asked for boiled willow rinse. The formula clerk objected that willow was not in court display standard. I am not preparing him for display. Severin allowed it with a nod. Still silent, still not soft. Odette did not touch Tharos until the handler placed the old dragon's shoulder within reach, and the witnesses recorded her distance from the open seam. She lifted one scar ridge with the padded hook, not enough to expose him to cold air, only enough to see what the old bowl had suggested. Brown-black residue lay under the scar plate, dry at the edge, softer near the skin. Not fresh, not bleeding, not proof of poison. Consistent with old cleanser, trapped over rot grit, aggravated by mineral gloss. She said every limit allowed. The clerk wrote them down. Tharos's breath loosened after the third slow rinse. The court heard it. A dragon's relief was not evidence of who had caused pain, but it was evidence that pain had existed, while the court called him presentable. Mavic was next. The weak little dragon trembled when the scent veil came near, so Odette had it removed beyond the basin line. Under the wing root, yellow-gray residue had sealed heat against thin membrane. Not open wound seep. Not yet. Fever residue trapped beneath scent binder, consistent with her excluded note. Full rinse, Odette said. No scent binder, no wing shine. Rest in open air. Dalmore exhaled through his nose. If every recovery dragon is treated as fragile, the court will present weakness to allies. Odette looked at Mavic, who had stopped shaking once the veil was gone. Then perhaps our allies should learn the kingdom keeps dragons alive before it makes them impressive. For the first time, a groom made a sound that might have become approval if fear had not swallowed it. Erend remained last. Severin stepped closer, when his bonded dragon lowered his throat, and Odette understood the cost of what he had refused to ask earlier. He had seen Erend obey, through war, through fire, through blood, and had mistaken endurance for consent. She lifted the throat seam under witness. The black residue did not pour. It did not spread. It clung beneath the same 3 scales, blue-gray at the edge, where smoke blew category. had marked old soot and cleanser burn. Beneath it, the skin was inflamed but unbroken. "Treatable," she said. Severin's face changed so slightly no envoy would have noticed. Odette noticed. He had expected judgment. She gave him work. Rinse, air rest, no display, no batch 12 on throat or wing seams until dilution and runoff classification are reviewed. The formula clerk wrote quickly. Then the charge packet slipped from the clerk's pile, and one folded instruction fell from behind the accusation summary. Remove washer's scale notes from envoy packet. Proceed with purifier standard. If she refuses presentation, classify tools as contamination risk. No personal signature marked the bottom. Only the display coordination desk seal, with airy purifier compliance stamped beneath it. Odette looked at the ash of her cloths, then at the three dragons finally breathing easier. The paper did not name Dalmore. It did not clear her. It proved the court had prepared a way to burn her records if she chose the dragons first. The instruction behind the charge packet did not say Dalmore Cress had ordered Odette Marlowe ruined. It said the court had prepared a punishment for any washer who chose seam care over spectacle. Remove washer's scale notes from envoy packet. Proceed with purifier standard. If she refuses presentation, classify tools as contamination risk. The sentence lay open on the marble table, small enough to be administrative and sharp enough to cut through every clean word the court had used that morning. Odette stood beside the lower washing channel with Erin's throat still damp from plain rinse, Tharos breathing easier under a lifted scar plate, and Mavek resting without a scent veil for the first time since dawn. Dragon King Severin Call ordered the root record for the charge instruction opened. He did not apologize. He did not restore Odette's authority. He did not yet clear the Ashcleanse Cloths. The accusation still existed, only thinner now, stretched across evidence it had never meant to carry. Dalmore Cress looked at the instruction, then at the airy purifier compliance stamp beneath it. Compliance stamp acknowledges that purifier standard could proceed if court display required it. No, Odette said. It allowed the charge to wear purifier language. The root record named 3 desks. Display coordination drafted the instruction after Odette refused presentation for Tharos, Mavek, and Erind. Ivory Scale's steward office marked ceremonial delay unacceptable before envoy arrival. Airy purifier office returned compliance. Private cloths outside approved right. Contamination risk if used across royal bodies. No personal signature, only officers speaking in words clean enough to survive blame. Severin read the dates. This was drafted before the cloths were inspected. The clerk answered softly. Yes, Majesty. Before the brazier was ordered? Yes. Dalmore's jaw tightened by a fraction. Private tools outside approved right were already a known concern. Odette looked at the ash ring. Known enough to burn before you knew what they held. The surviving Hemcode index was opened again, this time beside the contamination charge. The charge called all stained cloths dangerous because they retained matter removed from dragons. The index called retained matter record. Soot, parasite ash, cleanser burn, rot grit, fever residue, open wound seep. A court that wanted cleanliness had mistaken preservation for filth because preservation could be read later. Severin ordered every remaining residue sample, matched against the 3 treated dragons under witness. Not for guilt, not for final injury classification, only to see whether the same category followed the same wash route. Dalmore objected with care. Majesty, repeated testing in front of allied envoys may turn a narrow concern into diplomatic panic. It was made public when her cloths were burned before them, Severin said. Still, not apology. But the public wound had begun forcing public procedure. The comparison clerk examined Tharas's scar rinse, Mavek's wing root rinse, Erin's throat residue, the old winter bowl, yesterday's throat bowl, and the east floor groove trace. The patterns were not identical. Odette said that first, before anyone could use difference to destroy the whole question. Different bodies, she said. Different seams. Different time beneath scale. The clerk nodded. But each contains approved cleanser components with residue bound to the affected seam category. Say the limit, Odette said. The clerk glanced at her, then to Severin. It proves exposure category. It does not prove intent. It does not prove poison classification. It does not prove the same injury in all dragons. Dalmor lifted his chin. Then the spectacle is premature, Odette answered quietly. The spectacle was the burning. That struck harder than if she had shouted. The formula batch seals were brought forward. Trial brightening residue. Batch 9. Batch 12. Each bore an airy maker mark pressed into the approval wax, a 3-feathered flame inside a crescent bowl. Dalmor's personal office mark had adopted the same maker seal when he became airy purifier, though older versions belonged to the office before him. Not confession. Not personal guilt. A chain of authority. The residue clerk performed the maker-reactive wash, a court method used to identify official cleanser remains in disposal disputes. When warmed with plain rinse, approved purifier residue sometimes left a faint, seal-shaped mineral shadow where the binder settled. On ordinary soot, nothing appeared. On Arvin's outer plate sample, nothing appeared. On Orin's throat rinse, a broken crescent formed. On Tharos's scar rinse, the 3-feather lines appeared faintly under the brown-black residue. On Mavek's wing root rinse, the crescent showed pale beneath yellow-gray heat mark. The court did not cheer. It inhaled. The Ashcleanse categories had not named a culprit. They had led the court to the official residue still holding its maker seal where the dragons had been harmed. Dalmor stepped forward. A maker seal proves approved cleanser was present. It does not prove misuse. No, Odette said. It proves the court burned my records as contamination, while your approved residue remained under scale. For the first time, his smoothness cracked into anger. You imply what you cannot prove. I am stating what the rinse showed. Severin looked at the dragons beyond the arch. More waited there, polished for inspection, or half-prepared under scent veils. Open the remaining display packets, Dalmor said. Majesty, open them. 6 additional royal dragons had been scheduled across the day. 4 carried excluded washer notes. 2 did not. The 2 without seam warnings showed ordinary surface soil only. Of the 4 with excluded notes, 3 showed residue categories consistent with Odette's records when checked at the marked seams. The 4th needed no treatment beyond soot rinse. Again, not all. Again, enough. The pattern had become more dangerous because Odette refused to overstate it. It left the court no easy lie to defeat. Severin ordered all envoy display washes suspended pending seam review. Dalmor's purifier completion authority was placed under witness hold, not judgment. The display coordination desk seal was seized for audit. The basin disposal logs, maker-reactive wash results, hem code records, and excluded scale maps were sealed together. No restoration. Yet. No clearance yet. But the court could no longer say Odette had invented contamination to obstruct beauty. Then one final packet was opened from the morning's ceremony. The burn authorization itself. Reason for destruction. Ashcleanse Cloths retain royal dragon residue, including purifier compounds, after prohibited private seam contact. Burn before envoy court to prevent disclosure of unapproved residue. Odette read the last word once. Disclosure. Not infection. Not filth. Disclosure. The order had not feared what her cloths carried from dragon to dragon. It had feared what they could show if anyone let them survive. The burn authorization did not call Odette Marlowe filthy, because her cloths carried disease. It called her dangerous because her cloths carried memory. The word disclosure lay on the marble table between the ash ring and the sealed evidence packets. Envoys who had arrived to admire polished dragons now stood behind their veils watching court cleanliness become an archive of omissions. Tharos breathed beneath a loosened shoulder seam. Mavek slept without scent binder. Erend held his throat steady while the broken maker shadow under his scales dried into a shape no one could polish away. Dragon King Severin ordered the burn route read before the court. The washers, the purifiers, the handlers, the envoys, and the dragons whose bodies had been made into ceremony. He did not begin with forgiveness. He began with the records. The burn authorization had moved from display coordination to the ivory scale steward office, then to airy purifier compliance. Its purpose was to prevent disclosure of unapproved residue before envoy inspection. The charge packet against Odette had extracted refusal and contamination while omitting the aftercare list. Scale maps, hem code index, runoff warnings, and seam categories that would have explained why she refused. No single page contained the whole cruelty. That was how it had survived. Dalmor Cress stood beneath the white arch, robes immaculate, face controlled. Preventing disclosure of unapproved residue can mean protecting diplomatic confidence from misunderstood private handling marks. It does not prove malicious concealment. No, Odette said. It proves the court feared the record more than the stain. Severin turned to the comparison clerk. Read the maker. Residue findings. The clerk read them exactly. Not every dragon carried purifier residue under seam. Not every display wash had harmed skin. Arven's outer plates showed ordinary soot and clean rinse. One younger court dragon required no more than surface washing. But every dragon whose excluded map warned against display before seam care, Erend, Tharos, Mavek, and 2 others from the afternoon packet, showed official cleanser components bound beneath the marked seam. Each affected seam produced the airy maker shadow under plain rinse. Dalmor's current office used that maker seal. Not confession, not poison classification. A pattern that matched the records Odette had been punished for keeping. The formula pages followed. Batch 12, approved for visible ceremonial cleansing. Direct seam application, required dilution. Runoff into unopened seams, unclassified. Basin disposal logs showed full-strength pores over plates above marked seams. Rinse records measured shine, scent, and water clarity, not seam residue. Excluded scale maps identified the seams before the basins touched them. Severin faced the court. Odette Marlowe's Ashcleanse Cloths were burned as contamination, while they held residue categories this court needed to read. I ordered the burning before requiring the records that would have shown what the ceremonial basins missed. The words struck the washing court harder than the brazier had. Odette did not close her eyes. She had waited too long to let his admission become private relief. The accusation is withdrawn, Severin said. The Ashcleanse Cloths are restored as residue, category records under witness standard. Scale maps are restored to royal wash packets. No dragon marked by washer aftercare may be prepared for display until seam review is completed. Only then did he take the broken royal seal from the ash ring and place it on the evidence table, where everyone could see it had no power left. Odette's washing authority was restored before dragons, washers, purifiers, and envoys, not as kindness, as procedure. Dalmor's purifier completion authority was suspended pending inquiry into burn authorization, compliance stamps, batch runoff classifications, and removal of washer notes. The display coordination desk lost unilateral power to exclude scale maps. Basin rinse records received new columns. Seam opened, residue category, runoff path, dilution status, aftercare required. The court had learned, reluctantly, to write where bodies hurt. Then Silas Marlowe's file was opened. Odette's knees almost failed, but she remained standing. Formula receipts, lime cough records, purifier crew logs, hot basin exposure sheets, glove requests, trial brightening residue handling note, batch exposure records showing Silas assigned to 3 consecutive hot rinses after 2 workers were removed coughing from steam. The medical clerk read the amendment slowly. Poor constitution removed as final cause. Occupational purifier exposure recognized as contributing injury requiring compensation and formal review. Death classification reopened under formula exposure record. It did not give him back. It did not prove every breath that killed him. It stopped the court from calling his suffering weakness, because the formula had once looked official. Odette placed one hand on the table. Write his request for gloves into the health file, not maintenance. The clerk did. After that, the washing began. No envoys were dismissed. They were made to watch. Odette washed Tharos first, then Mavic, then the 2 unnamed dragons whose maps had been excluded, and Arind last because strength could wait for the weak. New cloths were cut under her direction from clean linen, marked by witness ink until proper Ashcleanse weaving could be restored. No perfume, no brightening mineral, no scent binder, plain rinse, patient seam lift, residue draw, air rest. The dragons did not become beautiful quickly. They became easier in their bodies. By dusk, the ivory scale washing court no longer smelled like flowers over heat. It smelled of wet stone, old ash, honest skin, and work no one could praise without admitting why it mattered. Severin came when the final ledger was signed. He did not touch her. I believed a courtier over the creatures that trusted your hands, he said, and over the records your hands made because mine refused to look. You believed the surface, she answered. Yes. She waited. I will spend my reign paying for the cost of that word. That was not enough for love. It was enough for a beginning. Odette looked past him to Arind, resting with his throat unsealed and clean, not flawless, not ready for display, but breathing without hiding pain. Then begin tomorrow by appointing washer authority strong enough to refuse you. Severin lowered his head before her in the court where he had burned her tools, not as a king choosing a woman, as a king acknowledging the labor that had kept his dragons alive, while his standards called it filth. The envoys saw it. The purifiers saw it. The washers saw it. Odette did not become gentle for him. She became visible, and when the new Ashcleanse cloth was laid across the washing table, no one called it clean because it was white. They called it clean because Odette Marlowe had taught the court what it must be willing to carry.